Good morning. Ladies and gentlemen, there's more seats here. It is a record crowd, but there are some spare seats down this end. It's wonderful to see you all, including new friends who haven't been to the Science and Research Breakfast seminar series before. This is the largest turnout we've ever had, and we're not sure whether it's the Deputy Premier and the Minister here, whether it's Nick, the School of Entrepreneurship. We'll see. In starting, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and pay my respects to their elders, past and present. We're honoured with the range of people who've turned up, including the Deputy Premier, the Honourable John Barilaro, who's also Minister for Regional New South Wales, Minister for Skills and Minister for Small Business. We're thrilled to see our former Minister, the Honourable Anthony Roberts, who's Minister for Planning, Minister for Housing and Special Minister of State and Leader of the House. Yasmin Catley, great to see the opposition here as ever, always supporting this. And Greg Piper, who's here somewhere, and any other MP I've forgotten. Thank you for letting us use Parliament House for these. You'll remember that in late January of 2016, I just snuck another seminar into our series, and that was to invite Nick Kay, who was then head of the School of Entrepreneurship in the Stockholm School of Entrepreneurship, to speak to us. And people really liked it, and a lot of things have happened since then that you're going to hear about. But to introduce Nick, I'm going to invite the Deputy Premier to address us, and then Minister Roberts is going to say a word, because without these two, we wouldn't be here with our own School of Entrepreneurship. Minister Roberts really catching on to the idea, and the Deputy Premier not only found the money, but also had some very good ideas about the importance of it covering regional New South Wales, and so we were able to introduce not only the TAFE but all the universities of the state, and that makes it special and somewhat different and better than the Stockholm School. Deputy Premier.
Well, good morning, and can I also start by acknowledging the traditional owners of these lands and paying my respect to elders past and present. I acknowledge my parliamentary colleague and ministerial colleague, Minister Roberts, otherwise known as Robbo the Good, Professor O'Kane, and of course Nick Kay, CEO of the Sydney School of Entrepreneurship. There's no question that New South Wales and Sydney is leading the way when it comes to research and innovation. And I do have to congratulate Minister Roberts for his insight and his vision on a number of fronts, not just with the Sydney School of Entrepreneurship, but when he was the Minister for Industry, really leading the charge when it comes to innovation in this state. You know, Robbo comes up with the ideas, he comes to me and I've got to fund it. As they say, no, I won't say what I'm about to say. Look, it's a $25 million investment in the Sydney School of Entrepreneurship because we really want to set the stage for young people to look beyond just getting a degree, a qualification, a job, a career, a great lifestyle. We really want to really stimulate the idea of entrepreneurship in this country and in this state. And when you look at New South Wales being, I believe, the capital for startups in New South Wales and across the nation, where 41% of the startups are here in Sydney, it is clear that we have an opportunity to keep moving that bar. And the Sydney School of Entrepreneurship, and Nick will talk to this shortly, really does allow that pathway for young people, some of the brightest in this state, to of course become the entrepreneurs of the future. Later this morning I'll go off to cross the bridge over to North Sydney, where we will announce some funding for a small startup, and it actually is 100 startups that we've announced and funded over the last 12 months through Jobs for New South Wales, another vehicle of the New South Wales government looking for those ideas, those entrepreneurs, the opportunities for what we call scalable innovation. And again, in partnership with Robbo in the Jobs for New South Wales component, I believe we really have set the state up for success going forward. You know, for me, it was important as the Minister for Regional New South Wales and previously the Minister for Regional Development to make sure that the opportunity was right across New South Wales, not just here in Sydney, and that's why it's important. And I do thank the 11 partnering universities. I know we're streaming live to many of them this morning, and I welcome you. but it was important to make sure that every person in this state, regardless where you lived, had the opportunity to be part of what I think is going to be something fantastic new in the Sydney School of Entrepreneurship. Having TAFE as a partner is just as important, because not everybody goes through the usual pathway of university in their life to gain the skill sets. I look at my own story as a uni dropout, wanting to be an accountant. I couldn't think of anything worse. Sorry to all those accountants in the audience this morning. I decided to become a chippy instead, and from there, of course, starting my own business and really using innovation and technology to change a manufacturing business in a niche market around energy-efficient windows, doors and building products. And it allowed me to do what I was passionate about, but at the same time pursue a life of being an entrepreneur, a business owner, and of course that has led to other opportunities, and now being Deputy Premier of New South Wales. So congratulations to everybody that's part of what we do in this state when it comes to innovation, to research, to startups, and making sure that we are the success, the global city, the global state that we know we are. And I congratulate everybody and thank you for your time this morning. Thank you very much.
Yes, you go straight ahead. This is the person who said he wants one of these.
That's right. Look, a very good morning to everyone. To Professor O'Kane, can I just acknowledge and pay tribute to your fantastic work that you continue to do. Mary is someone, if you don't know, and you can just see, and we can probably pan that camera for our friends around New South Wales and Australia, and indeed the world at some stage. We're all totally networked in to Mary. I mean, forget about the NBN. Mary is one of those great networkers that's connected all of us and delivers great outcomes. So, Professor, thank you so much for everything you do for the people of New South Wales and the Commonwealth. To my dear friend John Barilaro, member for Monaro, or Monaro as some people say, but it's Monaro, we never say, but can I say you are a great friend of innovation. You are bold, and particularly you're prepared to take risks, which of course Mary de-risks at times, mostly for us, but for the fact that you saw the vision, you saw what we could be, and you funded that. Without that money, we would not be here today. And that goes back about 14 months, can I say. And to my parliamentary colleagues, very warm welcome. And I've got to say, indeed, I'm sorry, I'm remiss to say, I look around at so many, I wouldn't say old friends, but people I've come to know in my previous portfolios, and I miss you, and I miss you all. Now that I've got planning, and I'll come to that in a second, but I'm going to be very brief. Around 14 months ago, we had one of these breakfasts, and these breakfasts continue to grow. Why? Because you get so much benefit from these breakfasts, just the knowledge that is imparted, and I've always believed that coming together with a goal where we want to make not just New South Wales but the world a better place, and to have great minds in the same room, talking with each other, sharing ideas and concepts is critical. But 14 months ago, I remember at the MLC one morning being invited by Mary to one of these breakfasts, and I met afterwards a young fellow from Stockham, and he was talking about this school of entrepreneurship, and I thought, isn't this magnificent? And what was even more magnificent, was that he was an Australian, as most Australians seem to do, unfortunately. He's had to go overseas to actually develop a new concept and an idea. And I said to Mary afterwards, well, it was actually Mary that came to me and said, wouldn't this be good, Minister? Just in my ear, wouldn't this be a good idea for New South Wales? And I said, well, absolutely. This is absolutely tremendous. It's fantastic. And my mind started going. So I said to Nick, Nick, how's the weather in Stockham at the moment? Just by way of conversation, psychological operations, blue sky, it was lovely. It was a lovely day. I don't think we would have had the same sort of outcome if it had been like yesterday or the day before. And I said, must be cold there. How much sun do you get in Stockham? You've got young kids. I mean, how awful. Where are you staying? The beaches are good. It's fantastic. Great lifestyle. Okay, and I just seated him. And then, of course, the hunt began between Mary and myself. Conversations here, phone calls there, a bit of correspondence, some invitations, and then, we captured you. And I can be quite frank and open now because we've got you. So I've got to say a very warm welcome back to Australia. It's where you should be. And Sydney is where you should be as well. New South Wales is an international city. This state, I've got to say, is going great guns. through hard work and certainly through the enterprise, not just of the government but its citizens. So as I look around this room this morning and as I speak to people across this nation, John Barilaro and myself have had conversations around what we can do for future generations. And we are both in total agreement. Well, we're always in total agreement, mostly. Sometimes. Yeah. Well, I agree with John most of the time, so it works out well for me. But can I make it quite clear that if anyone asks us what the assets are, the greatest assets of this state and the nation, it's not our farms, it's not our infrastructure, our hospitals, our roads, anything like that. It's not our mines. The greatest assets we have that we need to develop are our people. We need, in order to compete nationally and globally, we need to invest more in our people. And when I say people, not just young people, that's critical, but people through every stage of life. And that is why having the Sydney School of Entrepreneurship there that is open across universities, TAFE, to be a guiding beacon where we say to people, take a chance, be bold. If you have an idea, we'll do our very best to assist you to take it to the next level. And we have to move away from the days where we rely on government all the time for everything. This is about recreating a culture in this country where we become the leaders. You can't become an international city, you can't become an international player unless you invest in the people that are going to drive that and drive that change. Because change is all around us. Change will continue. But it's ensuring that we give every person the opportunity to be the very best they can, every person the opportunity to develop an idea they have, whether it's a first-year university student who's a teacher that thinks of a better way in order to educate a young child through technology, or whether it's someone that's retired, that has some time. And again, I want to thank John for our last raid, I think, before I left, of about $11 million for universities. And it wasn't my idea, John, it was Mary's. Yeah. Sorry to dob you, Mary. Where we gave $1 million to our universities each, $1 million dollars each, to develop advanced manufacturing. So those people tinkering around in their back sheds, designing better products, designing better ways to do things, would be able to take again that to the next level. So can I thank again the professor, our chief scientist. Nick, it is so good to have you here. I bet the family's enjoying it. Well, probably not it's sort of like to those friends in Melbourne, it's sort of, if I can explain, the weather in Sydney's just been like what you get every day in Melbourne for the past week, but it is clearing up. But it's great to have you here. Welcome, and I'll let you get on with the event. Thank you very much.
I think we're going to talk about the discipline of history in the future. It's wonderful to have Nick present. Nick, I think it's a case of no more introduction. Come and talk to us about the School of Entrepreneurship. And those who are listening online, and there are several in a range of universities organised through the School of Entrepreneurship, if you want to send a question in, the Twitter handle is at SSENSW. So, and hello to those, New York, Paris, London. We understand you're there too. Hope you enjoy it. Nick, over to you.
Good morning. What a great honour to be here today. I couldn't feel more welcome back in Australia, and I couldn't feel more inspired to have the opportunity to work with such visionaries. We've just heard from three incredible people who together really have crafted an opportunity for New South Wales, and as a result for Australia, that is unprecedented, and I'll come back to that. And it's just something I think we see once in a lifetime, really, in many respects, and I'm delighted to be a part of that. Now, I have quite a few thank yous to say this morning, and I think they're a wonderful testament to the breadth of support that we have behind this initiative. I'll be relatively brief, but I'd just like to bring together our community. Now, of course, the Deputy Premier, for his his wonderful words, innovation and collaboration as the cornerstone for jobs is your platform. And I can say, as an Aussie returning to the country, New South Wales is the place to be. It's a terribly exciting place to be on a global platform. Minister Roberts, thank you for your support from day one. Thank you for that vision. And again, I'm just delighted at that breadth of interest and that enduring support, not to mention the speed at which this initiative has been pulled together. Professor Mary O'Kane, what more can I say? I think we've had some beautiful introductions today. We all know Mary is an incredibly special person on many levels, and so many initiatives for New South Wales just wouldn't exist without her generosity, her foresight, and her wonderful energy and network, of which we're all thankfully a part. The Department of Industry, and in particular Simon Smith and Sam McLean, I'd like to say a very warm thank you to, and their extended team, because they took what was an idea and they took an idea to the point of inception, and they did some very hard work in the early days of making what is today the Sydney School of Entrepreneurship the opportunity it's become. So thank you so much to all of you. I haven't done a lot of work with government previously, but I must say it was an eye-opener and it was a pleasure and it was quite an amazing experience. I couldn't speak more highly of the group. Our wonderful steering committee led by Brian Boyle from UNSW, representatives from our member schools who pulled together in the early stages to create the Sydney School of Entrepreneurship and work through the development of the Constitution and the underpinning platform. Thank you all so much for the work that you did and for, again, creating this terrific opportunity. Many of you are still involved, and I know your hearts are very much in this new community, and we look forward to working with you in a myriad of ways over time. Our 12 member institutions, so we'll come back to them, but all 11 universities in New South Wales and TAFE New South Wales, led of course by their Vice-Chancellors, who have been terrific supporters in person from day one of this initiative, but equally important, supported throughout those institutions in a great variety of fashions by those who will on a day-to-day basis also form the heart and soul of the Sydney School of Entrepreneurship. Thank you to all of you, to those Vice-Chancellors and to the MD of TAFE New South Wales for pulling together and sharing this entrepreneurial vision for their students' future, for the common good. We've had some wonderful help in the early days from other university-based collaborations, in particular very much Intersect, Mark's here I saw earlier, and ARNet as well. Thank you again very much for helping us get a leg up in the early stages and for helping us pull together the Sydney School of Entrepreneurship. To all our satellites out there, we have 20 events at which we're being live streamed today. Mary mentioned some cities. Let's not forget, I think we may have had Stockholm in there. We've got San Francisco and London as well. So we have a great many friends around the globe who see this as a wonderful opportunity to connect to New South Wales, and we look forward to working with them and their students over time. Thank you all for joining us today. Last and very far from least, our wonderful entrepreneurial ecosystem across New South Wales and our friends in industry. We've spoken a lot about the birth of this platform, and it's a very important part of this process because those foundations are something that will carry us forward across the years. But of course, the lifeblood of all that we're doing is connecting with the community and is enabling and upskilling these students to work in the broader context of industry and the startup ecosystem. So I've had the privilege of meeting hundreds of people, I would say many, if not most, of the key leaders in particularly the startup community over the past months, and I just thank you again for your generosity and your welcome, and we're looking forward to co-creating this future with you and really leveraging the Sydney School of Entrepreneurship. So, from unique to unprecedented, what am I speaking about there? When I spoke, and I'm not going to dwell on it, I will come back briefly to the Stockholm School of Entrepreneurship because I think it does underpin some of the opportunities we see in Sydney. But when I spoke here in February last year, Stockholm is an amazing collaboration of 5 leading universities in the capital city of Sweden, Stockholm. What we've done here is unprecedented. 12 institutions across the state of New South Wales. It's globally groundbreaking. It's something that will have the eyes of the global community in this space upon it, and I think is a really important development in a much broader sense. And so I'm just delighted that we can all be part of creating this together. Stockholm had a set of conditions that made it possible over the 15 plus years of its existence as a school, the Stockholm School of Entrepreneurship, to develop as it has been able to. And those elements included, again, top-level support from the Vice-Chancellor level in the membership universities, subsequently the ability to leverage infrastructure across those entities. It had cornerstone financing that made it viable over a longer time horizon to demonstrate impact and to continue to seek further investment and support through its activities. It had an integrated academic program over time, as well as a large portfolio of co-curricular activities offered across its membership. And I'd say almost most importantly, by this point in time, it has an alumni community that advocates on its behalf. And I'll come back to community, but this is, to me, a key to our future when it comes to the Sydney School of Entrepreneurship. In a broader context, it was in a fast-growing startup community, highly educated population, small market with a global focus, and had some unique, I think, lifestyle opportunities there and advantages for the populace. So what about Sydney and New South Wales? What do we have? I think in our context, we have that wonderful commitment by 12 institutions, not 5, more than twice as many. We have that cornerstone financing, absolutely critical and part of the reason and the context for which I was delighted to take this role. Not because it's great to have a large amount of financing, but because real change takes time. It is a marathon, not a sprint, a marathon with many surges, but it does take time and it needs to be given that time horizon and that runway to have that full impact and demonstrate that. And that cornerstone financing, while it is primarily endowment, gives us that opportunity to really develop a viable and long-term community and platform. We've got a standalone headquarters. Again, I'll come back to that in just a little more detail. Located in the Ultimo Chippendale precinct, right near Central, so we're very well connected across the state. We're on the TAFE campus, opposite UTS there, and I think as an HQ that will be an excellent cornerstone facility from which to work both out and back towards from all our partners. We're nested in a thriving and rapidly growing startup ecosystem, very dynamic with a lot of terrific actors in it. It's New South Wales today, not 10 years ago. I do think we've seen some amazing developments in Australia, and I think particularly New South Wales, and this is just in my mind the time to be here taking this type of initiative. We're not solely based in a capital city. I think this is absolutely marvellous. We've been lucky enough that we had visionary leaders who saw the opportunity of reaching beyond Sydney. And I'm delighted that in all my discussions across the state and within Sydney, that's something that is a value shared by all members. Not members at a distance who think it's great to be connected to a hub in Sydney, because that's not the way we envisage this working, but all members in that our Sydney-based partners see such an opportunity in having a very viable conduit across the state into other regions that they don't normally spend the time in, and they see that as a wonderful opportunity for their student, and we look forward to delivering on that front. So Australia's changing, and so I think is the brand of the entrepreneur, and we're just really excited to be a part of that future. So the next generation of New South Wales entrepreneurs. We want to empower entrepreneurial thinkers. We want to empower the business creators of the future. We want to bring together students and faculty across disciplines, across institutions, across regions. We want to see doctors sitting next to dentists, sitting next to viticulturalists, sitting next to designers. We believe that's where the real power of this sort of initiative comes from. And we will be working tirelessly to curate a serendipity that just wouldn't exist otherwise. We have many wonderful membership organisations all doing marvellous things in this space of their own making. But what we don't have is that common interaction, and we think as a larger common stage we can offer something very special in that context. Physically, the steering committee made a decision that we would have a physical HQ. I was delighted by that, and I think it's very important because I think it is important to anchor a broader community in a variety of fashions. I think we have the advantage of using a wonderful IT infrastructure and AV backbone these days, but I think it is very important to also have a physical opportunity, and I'm delighted that we've been able to do that in some way that's relevant to the city is wonderful, but particularly with respect to connecting all our entities. We're going to be very pragmatic and applied. And really what we're looking at is the impact that we can have over time with our students. We've got a lot of learnings that we can take on board from Stockholm, but we're informed by Stockholm. We're not modelled on Stockholm. There are common elements, those elements that we thought brought value to our New South Wales context. There are lessons we can learn from the failures in Stockholm. There are lessons we can learn from the many, many wins that Stockholm's had. But we're also working from a blank sheet of paper, which is a huge advantage 15 plus years on. When we look at how we design our activities, how we design our courses and programs, the world has markedly changed, and our customer group, our students, think very differently as to how they want to consume content and how they want to interact. And we look forward to being able to be very responsive to that as a common and neutral platform. So informed by the members, informed by global best practice, but very applied, very pragmatic, and trying a lot of new methodology and content in that context. So really, this is also today a call to the coalition of the willing out there who want to be part of this. This is an opportunity. This is not a given. We have the membership of all those institutions. What we need to do over time are find those people that see this opportunity and would like to play into it. And we will do all we can to facilitate the most wonderful experience and interaction, both with our students, but also for our academics, for our trainers from industry and the entrepreneurial ecosystem, to help upskill them, to help connect them further globally. You all have your own networks. We just think we can leverage as a common stage opportunities that individually institutions and startups may not have themselves. So how do we do this? I touched on the new campus. Sydney in name. Sydney's a tricky one. I happened to come back post that seminar for Mary in August last year, and I was lucky enough to be hosted at the University of Newcastle, and it was after the name of the institution had been announced in my new role. And as you wouldn't be surprised to hear, people were querying the name with, I think, good reason. I think the name is the name we need on a global basis when it comes to branding and recognition, but I think it is quintessentially important for us to realise that we're Sydney in name only and statewide in operation, global in aspiration and reach. That's our DNA, that's how we look forward to living and working. We believe in a genuinely interconnected model. Exactly how that looks, I don't know. We're going to work it out together. What I certainly don't see is a hub in the city broadcasting across the state. We will work with strategic points around the state. We will do a lot of virtual work in groups with students. We've had several activities with different partners already and are finding that there are fantastic mediums for sharing those interactions, and it doesn't matter whether they're in Lismore or whether they're in Bathurst or whether they're in Wagga or whether they're in Western Sydney or they're in Ultimo, but that we can leverage those opportunities across the state. We also have a scholarship program in place that we'll be looking to our corporate partners over time to further support us with for mobility. And that mobility, as you may well imagine, isn't about moving students from outside Sydney to Sydney, but it's about moving students around the state, from Sydney across the state, from region to region. And we think there's a wonderful opportunity with Australia's incredible diversity, New South Wales landscape, to do a lot, leveraging that as well as the content that we can find out there in the startup businesses. So co-creation, complementary to, not competitive with. Again, we're all fully aware of wonderful activities within our own domains in the entrepreneurship and innovation space. And there have been so many inroads made around this within the universities and TAFE in recent times, but also just across the community. So many wonderful courses and trainers and activities and meetups. Again, let's remember that in the case of the Sydney School of Entrepreneurship, this is a larger common platform. This is an opportunity to do certain things together. It's not all entrepreneurship. It's not all interdisciplinarity. It's not all interregional activities, but it's a component of all those where we can come together to do things that we wouldn't do alone. And I think if we take a broader view, it's a wonderful, wonderful opportunity to connect our global networks back to Sydney and New South Wales and to be able to say, hey, when you're passing through Australia, please consider coming and working with us. You will impact this broader group, not just one of our many important stakeholders, but all of them. I'm just thinking, I hosted a fireside chat at Sydney University a fortnight ago with Ryan Holmes, the CEO and founder of Hootsuite. And for those people unfamiliar with Hootsuite, it's a social media dashboard out of Canada, valued arguably at about $1 billion at the moment. And it's his fourth startup. And I was asking him about, and I should mention too, we had a wonderful room of 150 people at Sydney University listening to us. And the world we're working with, there were 30,000 people at one point following that particular discussion on Facebook Live. So this is, again, just the opportunities that abound for these distance interactions from all points of the state. But of course, I had to ask Ryan about his thoughts when it came to university, and he dropped out. He got through 3 or 4 years. Students ask him, of course, should I drop out? And I love his answer. He says, I have no idea. It's a completely personal decision, is his advice. Now, of course, what we're interested in here and what we're looking at is how do we want to ensure that they choose to leverage the opportunities we present within their paradigm of tertiary education rather than doing so they can develop their T-shaped person skills beyond their immediate discipline, but we can offer them something so special collectively that dropping out isn't an option because they can get more by being part of this larger common platform and this opportunity we offer together. Together we really increase that collective impact and that combined power. And again, that is the co-creation element. It isn't me coming to Sydney, New South Wales to tell us how to do this, given Stockholm experience. It's to bring some ideas, some thoughts, some frameworks, some people I met over time that can feed into the process, but it's actually to sit down together and work out, well, how do we do this? At this point in time, from today moving forward, given the resources at hand, both within our 12 members, but also within the Sydney School of Entrepreneurship Hub, how do we do this together? And that journey we've embarked upon, I'll come back very shortly to exactly where we're up to in that process. But ultimately, our success will be judged through our students and our alumni. It'll be judged through their impact on the world, not just through wealth creation, but I think through the creation of a lot of other social good. And I think from them speaking on our behalf. And that takes time, and that's a journey we're all embarking upon together. But having seen that go full journey in Stockholm, I think it's something truly exciting and something we can look forward to seeing over time. So the larger common stage we've spoken of, undoubtedly that diagram should be a little bit broader in terms of the different centres there. I think it's just, again, realising that providing access and that interaction is just part of our DNA. And I was so delighted again to hear both the Deputy Premier and the Minister today speaking further about that being a fundamental backbone to what we're doing. I look forward to living that. I think it's a wonderful opportunity and challenge. I think it's going to have real fruits of reward there. 40% of jobs will not exist in 10 to 15 years, so says the New South Wales Innovation Strategy. 60% of the best jobs in 10 years are yet to be invented. Again, we want to be a part of that future. We want to provide access to entrepreneurial thinking. We want to help craft those opportunities that will result. So why here? I think many of us will be familiar with these figures. I'm not going to dwell on them today. But, incredibly, net jobs growth comes from 6% of small, fast-growing companies. We know from Startup Master, 40% of startups founded in New South Wales, twice as many as any other state, just as a reference point. $109 billion of value from the startup community in the Australian economy by 2033, and we're top 3 startup ecosystems in Asia at this point. I think we'd all love to continue to work really hard to do better on that front too. So we are positioned in a time with the type of visionary support, and I think with the context that makes what we're doing both a valid opportunity, a reality, and something that's terribly important for our future. We're a creature of our time. Similarities to these funny beasts. We're not going to directly employ any permanent teaching staff. We're not going to academically credit our own students. And I think that makes for a really exciting model where with our partners and with that involvement, we're again able to leverage a greater platform to have a real impact on the world outside traditional models, just as our friends on the screen there have been able to do in their respective and different ways. So Stockholm School of Entrepreneurship. I'm terribly proud of what has been achieved in Stockholm to date and the wonderful support from the benefactors, from the partners in that context, just to give you a little bit of a feel. And this is important, I think, because it is a point of reference and a success story that we can draw on in our new context with the amazing journey ahead of us. But Stockholm's now graduated more than 13,000 students from its academic programs over time. It's offered more than 220 academic courses at a bachelor's, master's and PhD level, more than 200 guest contributors annually. This is really important in my book. These are people from industry, from the startup ecosystem, international guests that feed in as guest lecturers, as mentors, as advisors, as entrepreneurs in residence. More than 60 schools involved globally, meaning there are exchange students within those member institutions from across 60 institutions around the globe. So just, again, diversity, a really interesting representation and a really interesting community as a result, and an extensive co-curricular portfolio of activities, which as we forge ahead and we co-create this new platform together, it's going to be an exciting journey to look at what elements of academic subjects at the respective levels do we host, how exactly do we credit them over time, and in which format does it make most sense to offer them, and what types of co-curricular activities. And by co-curricular, I mean inspirational activities of 1,000 people. I mean seminars, boot camps, international workshops, pitches, all those activities that aren't academically credited in a more traditional and formal sense. So why do we say it's a proven model? I think these are just some quick stats. Per capita, the most number of unicorns or startups valued at in excess of $1 billion in the world, behind Silicon Valley. 35% of the alumni of the Stockholm School of Entrepreneurship. I don't think I've slipped yet on interchanging those names. 35% of the alumni, entrepreneurs from SSES over there, or 35% of alumni are entrepreneurs, more importantly. Some terrific valuations of alumni companies, and 19% of alumni also sit on corporate boards. So it's not that all graduates become entrepreneurs or start businesses, but very much the belief is that their education through that model has very positive impacts in other sectors too. We could have a whole nother discussion around metrics of success, but we'll do that another time. Community. I touched on it earlier. Community is everything in my book. Community in Stockholm has meant that in the early days, I've met hundreds of people in New South Wales recently, and many of them, as was the case in Stockholm in the early days, are terrific alumni of the member institutions who are willing to give back and who are willing to come and speak to students and support them in a variety of ways. Incredibly generous. What we saw increasingly in time in a Stockholm context, as you might imagine, is that our own alumni would come back. And they would come back and guest lecture, they would mentor, they would then come back and start recruiting our students in time. They would come back and start financing our student startups or introducing their venture capitalists, and suddenly you have a trusted community that you as an honest broker are in a position to work with. We are an honest broker. The only way we can convince you of that is behave in that fashion over time and show you that this is a true opportunity for all of us. Yes, we have 12 stakeholders, 12 incredible institutions, all the 11 universities in New South Wales and TAFE New South Wales as our owners, and they are our owners. So that is the backbone of this platform. But we work for their collective interests, and we work for the interests of New South Wales and job creation. We work to serve the startup ecosystem. And in that context, we believe over time we can craft a community that will trust and invest in us, and we in turn will be a feeder back into that community in a variety of ways. So a little bit of, and I should actually finish that previous slide by saying again, the key to all this over time is the alumni. I can stand here and talk to you until I'm blue in the face about what a wonderful initiative this is, and hopefully in time the impact we've had through our courses and activities. But you'd much rather listen to the people who have been through those activities doing just that. And that's our aim, and that will be very much one of those, I think one of those key metrics over time that will determine whether or not we've succeeded, as I believe we will, in doing just this. So a little bit more about community. You will recognise, many of you, some of these different environments. We're lucky enough to have 12 incredible partners out there across the state that are going to feed into this community. Physical campuses, nearly 200 in total across the state that have a relationship with us through their member institutions. That's terrific, and we look forward to working with that community to determine where we can have the most impact in the immediate future and how we can best connect into that broader base, both on a physical level as well as by bringing students together across the state. So the Sydney School of Entrepreneurship itself, from the ground up, this is our starting point, this is our floor in our building. So it's wonderfully some parquetry from the original George Street in the Rocks that has been in the building and that we've reclaimed. And what have we done? To this point in time, and let's remember it's 14 months, it's incredibly quick, I think, as a process to have a decision made on a state level, to have funding put in place, to recruit a steering committee, and at a distance a CEO, to identify and begin to fit out a central location, which will be completed mid-year, to convene a founding board of directors. I haven't thanked them specifically today, they're part of the ongoing team, but they're a wonderful group who have stepped up now in an ongoing capacity as a board of directors to support us and who are working very hard and very tirelessly behind the scenes to make what I talk very much about an iceberg. You see a little bit of what we're doing on the surface. As you can imagine, this type of collaboration takes a lot of work beneath the surface level as well to make sure it is sustainable and that the foundations are solid over time. And as you can imagine, during the setup phase, that's been important, and that board has been tireless in working to do just that. We've been reaching out across the ecosystem. We've been to all of our member institutions as a team. I've met so many generous people, and if there are any people in the audience or people you know that I haven't had the privilege of meeting but I should, and by I mean myself and of course my team, please do help connect us. But there's been wonderful generosity in sharing key contacts across the network so that we're beginning to get a feel for the key players in town and who at this point would like to be more actively involved. As we said, we're co-creating. That's not just with the members, that's with the entrepreneurial startup ecosystem. So we're looking for win-wins there too. And then, of course, launch of operations. I mentioned the fireside chat. We had a wonderful event with UTS recently, co-hosted in their business school about the future of education. We look forward to working with our members in just a variety of ways. As we move into the second semester of this year, we will have a physical locale. We will have courses in that locale and other activities. But we also look forward to co-curating different activities at the members across the state and in a variety of fashions. And we're the first to say, we're a startup, we're bootstrapped. We're trying new things as we go. We're part of this journey ourselves. All of my team now know, if they didn't already, what it feels like to be starting from a blank piece of paper and solving those day-to-day issues and challenges, working with complex stakeholders, bringing together partners, working with customers, trying to balance the daily demands and needs in those environments. And I think that sets us up very well for the sort of people we're going to have to work with. But we look forward to co-creating that immediate future with the community and with the membership schools. And I think on that note, it's a great time to do what I enjoy most, and that's open up the floor to your questions. I know that's a very macro level outline today, and I think it's important that we have that common picture in hand. But please, we look forward to interacting, we look forward to your ideas, we look forward to feedback and working together over time.
Great. Thank you, Nick. We have time for a couple of questions. We do have to finish at about 5:02 because we've got another seminar that we're running for parliamentarians. So ad for the parliamentarians here, that's round the back there. But I've been passed questions that have come in over the Twitter feed. So the first question, and then I'll take a couple from the floor. What has been the ongoing support for graduates in Stockholm, and how does that translate to Sydney, Nick?
So I think one of the step closer takes a variety of forms. So we've seen alumni come back to active activities, so attending and joining international boot camps. Where in that context, we had always been looking for win-wins. I think probably the biggest activity is, in effect, a homecoming of types called Startup Day that's been hosted annually. So that's 1,000 people, highly curated but very interactive, and that's been a nexus point to bring alumni together and connect them with the current community. As always, I think there's even more to do on that front, and that will be part of what we address in Sydney.
Great. Question from the floor here. Oh, Peter.
Thank you. Very good to hear it, Nick. What reliance will you have, or will you consider providing funding connections, or are you going to keep very neutral on that to let all these entrepreneurs find their own money?
Thanks, Peter. Great question. So I've used the term honest broker a few times, neutral platform. The homecoming I just mentioned, the most recent one that I attended, had 50 plus financiers at it of different shades, angels, VCs and others. We, in that context, have never made specific introductions. We've created forums where people can meet, and I'm a big believer in not having tie-ups with one specific entity, but in us, again, being an honest broker and a feeder into this ecosystem. We look forward to the Startup Hub in Sydney and where we can feed into that. In some respects, we look forward to working with really most other players that are working in accelerator or incubator space, and how we can feed into them and make sure our community are aware of them, and likewise different opportunities when it comes to finance. So our aim is to make that information available as broadly as possible to our community.
You're also interested in getting scholarships, aren't you? So scholarships for students in the school to take subjects, whether it might allow people to travel in or to work with people. So interested in creative scholarships that people who want to give them might themselves have ideas about how they run. Yes, down the back.
Hi Nick. the company that I just worked for, we did a bit of validation with about 1,000 startups in New South Wales around what's most important to them over the next couple of years, and very clearly to them it was money. It was access to investment capital. But there seems to be a huge gap between their understanding of raising money, financial literacy, dealing with investors, dealing with VCs, cap tables, term sheets. It's pretty complicated, but there doesn't seem to be too much education out there about how to raise money. I just wanted to ask Nick if there's a plan to maybe offer, aside from building businesses, how about dealing with investors, educating the youngsters on how to go about that?
Thanks, Matt. I think it's important to note that all those related types of upskilling, essentially, I see as falling into our potential auspices there. So in discussion with our stakeholders, but most certainly, just one point to note, of course, our students come by way of our 12 members. So we're not taking students directly from the street, we're taking students through those members, but in that context, there's certainly skills that would be potentially offered to that community and have been in Stockholm, for example.
And I think, Nick, we're going, even though there are other questions there, I'm going to wind it up because we are pushed time. We always get people out the door by 9 and we have this other seminar. So before I thank Nick, however, I do want to remind you about the next seminar. So we change topics somewhat and we go to cane toads. No jokes about cane toads. And we're going to hear from Professor Rick Shine, who of course won Scientist of the Year last year here in New South Wales Scientist of the Year. But then he went on to win that slightly lesser prize, the Prime Minister's Prize for Science. So he did. It was a good year, and it was a great year for Rick, not such a great year for cane toads, but you can hear all about it on the 28th of June, and I look forward to seeing you there. And ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank Nick, not only for a great seminar, but for really energising this school, taking up the opportunity, running with it. And I'm looking forward to hearing not just how it goes, but I'm hoping in a few years' time, there might be another person in this role by then, we'll be hearing alumni of the school who will be making squillions, because if those of you who read the Sydney Morning Herald on Saturday would see I have actually made Nick's KPI quite explicit. Otherwise, bad things happen. But we want to thank him for what he's done and for a great seminar. Join me in thanking Nick Kay. Thanks, Nick. Thank you all. Bye.